Good morning. My first line is, welcome to this place of comfort. It's right here. Back in the day, we had about 3 things, but they all worked all the time. Now we have all these things, and sometimes they work. The heat is now on, I'm told. But welcome to this place of challenge, of the familiar and the surprising. I'm Dave Lloyd. I'm a member of the congregation. Our regular Sunday services are led by our minister, Beth Johnson. I'll be leading the service today from time to time. If you're new here, members of the congregation do get to lead services from time to time. Tony Metters is our worship associate, and our music is led by Jamie Passman. Tech services are provided by Alex Dvorak. We keep having new people show up in church lately, people I don't know, which is exciting. If you're new here or visiting, please join us for coffee and snacks downstairs after the service. Grab a green mug so we know to greet you. There's always a lot going on around the church, and you can read all about it in News and Notes, which arrives in your inbox every Friday. If you'd like to receive News and Notes, you can go to the church's website, hinsdaleunitarian.org, and click on the Connect button on the top of the homepage. Or talk to the friendly people at our visitors table in the living room at the back of the church, and we can get your email address. We have a special presentation this morning regarding the UU prison ministry.
Good morning. I'm Julia Beckman, and I'm just here representing the wonderful people who work with our prison ministry. Today is a special day because Debbie Daniel Wayman in the bookstore is going to be selling books that the prisoners have requested. It's very interesting. They request them, and then they will, if you go down and buy one, it will go to a prisoner. You don't have to mail it or anything. It will just be sent to the prisoners. But the interesting thing is, if you go down and look at the list of books that they request, it's not, the Bible or Shakespeare or a book of poetry, which you might want to send them. No, it's how do I learn to weld? How do I learn math? They want to learn practical skills. So they request these books, but they're not often sent. So this is our chance for the Christmas season to help these particular prisoners who have requested these books. So you can just go downstairs. You know how a book can transport you and educate you and even offer you some hope? Because they will be learning skills through these books that gives these prisoners hope. You'll be doing that for someone who is incarcerated in an Illinois prison this holiday season. So please think about that downstairs at Debbie's bookstore. I wanted to just read you very quickly something from a prisoner who has written to me. We've been writing to each other for 2 or 3 years. He's in a downstate prison. We try to say they're incarcerated rather than prisoners. But he is a white man from Decatur who in prison became a Muslim. So I just wanted to read a little bit of what he's told me about that, about Thanksgiving. He says, I had asked him what he was doing for Thanksgiving down there, and he said, I personally don't celebrate most of the days that are celebrated in this country, some because of religious beliefs and some for moral objections. Please don't get me wrong, though there's nothing wrong with us being thankful, but like I was discussing with my mother, shouldn't every day be a day of thankfulness to our Lord? Shouldn't we show appreciation to our loved ones every day? Shouldn't every day be Mother's Day? I'd be up for that. Mother's Day. In regards to Thanksgiving, when I think, this is very important for someone like this. When I think about its origin and the true history that played out between the Pilgrims and native people of this country, I feel uncomfortable celebrating this encounter. So he's really a deep thinker. He says, I personally decided not to go out for the Thanksgiving meal that day. I was actually fasting on that day. For the past several years, I've fasted on Mondays and Thursdays voluntarily. It's called the Fast of the Prophet. One does so seeking God's mercies, which I'm always in need of, he says. And then he says, I know some of my positions on certain issues are upsetting to some, But I think it's important for people to be honest with each other, and expressing our differences is good as long as it's done respectfully. Couldn't ask for more than that, and that's for someone who's been in prison a very long time, has had a lot of time to think. Anyway, please do stop at the bookstore and check out the titles that you can buy for a prisoner this holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
We light our chalice, the symbol of our church and denomination, with these words: in the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share.
Pam, it's time for all ages? Or
This morning, the service is about the generosity of the earth. And so I thought it'd be fun to learn and feel through the earth with a special meditation. So I invite you to join along. I am Earth.
I am the earth. I am the highest mountain and the deepest ocean. I am the dense forests and the flowing rivers. I sustain and support the whole world and all creatures. I am stable and grounded like a tree, pressing my roots deep into the earth and reaching my branches up towards the sky. I stand tall and strong, connected to myself and all creatures around me. I close my eyes and listen to the sounds around me. What can I hear? I take a big breath in through my nose. What can I smell? I tune into my body. What sensations can I feel right now? I am a heavy fallen log lying still on the forest floor. I relax my whole body and feel my weight pressing down on the solid ground below. I can feel how strong Mother Earth embraces me and keeps me safe.
now let's sing our children to their classes with these words. As you go, rejoice. Rise in body or spirit and join in our first hymn, The Star of Truth, number 297, in your gray hymnal and projected on the screen. There was a Kurt Vonnegut story in which everyone who had talent at anything, singing or dancing or was very beautiful, had to wear a mask to hide their beauty or had to wear things around their throat to make their songs not as good, or weights so that they couldn't dance as well. Congress had imposed absolute equality on everyone. In that spirit, when I choose music for the services, since I can't sing, I want to make sure that no one else can sing the songs either. But in a very skilled way, let's hear our first reading.
This is a reading from the Dalai Lama. Generosity is the most natural outward expression of an inner attitude of compassion and loving kindness. When one desires to alleviate the suffering of others and to promote their well-being, then generosity, in action, word, and thought, is this desire put into practice. It is important to recognize that the generosity here refers not just giving in the material sense, but to the generosity of the heart.
Relax in your chair. Feet on the floor. Breathe deep in. Hold that breath. Think of, in this past month, or if it's a little longer, some generosity that some person has showered upon you. The feeling that gave you, and what you could recognize as the feeling that that person held while sharing with you. And concentrating on that feeling, the feeling you have when you are generous to others, when you have made a difference. Not the ego of, look what I've done, but looking at the other person, knowing how they feel, being a recipient, how you feel from sharing. Another deep breath in. Cleansing breath out. And back to this space. We enter this space, bringing with us joys, concerns, challenges, and blessings. If you have something either weighing or dancing on your heart this morning, you're invited to come up, drop a stone. If you wish, you can say a name, a word, or a short phrase to share your intention.
Last week I told you about my cousin who was suffering from lung cancer and her husband who had a stroke. I put stones in hoping that they'd get better. They died within hours of each other last Sunday. On a brighter note, thanks to Laura and Tim, we had a fabulous feast on Thanksgiving.
bringing stone in for my family. My mother, who's 86, is in hospital. She has dementia. She's been in and out of there for a few months. My father is 92 and at home alone for the first time, probably in 60 years, and particularly to my sister, who's carrying the burden of making sure they have the care that they need.
Let me add 3 stones. One for all the concerns that may be too tender to share and the joys that we choose not to share. For this community who shares all those and gets us through the good and bad times. And as always, for our leaders, that they remember where they live, who they serve.
A reading from Oren J. Sofer of the Buddhist Insight Network. The practice of dana. The first thing the Buddha often taught to lay followers was the practice of dana, or generosity. When we give freely from the heart, we feel a natural sense of joy, connection, and belonging. This experience of well-being, when consciously recognized and fostered, creates an essential foundation for the path to awakening. The spirit of generosity is woven into the fabric of traditional Buddhist societies, where the lay and monastic communities have lived in dependence upon one another for millennia. Monks and nuns offer spiritual and religious guidance to the lay community, who in turn offer material support in the way of food, medicine, clothing, and shelter. There are many ways to give. We give time. We give energy. We listen. We give with our care, with our service, or with our finances. The practice of dana invites us into a relationship of mutuality, care, and joyful connection. Making a donation is just one way to express this.
As we take our collection for the support of the church, let's say these words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with people around us, and with the world. Thank you in advance for your generosity. Thank you, everyone. About a month ago, just before Halloween, I saw a scary movie called Rec. That's R-E-C, as in the record button on a video camera. The movie was made in Spain, in Spanish, with English subtitles, and set in Spain. The premise is that there is a camera crew from a TV show that goes to a fire station to hang out with firefighters and see how they spend their days. At one point, they get a call to go out to an apartment building where a woman is sick and flipping out, and they get out there, and it's zombies. It's a good movie. It's scary and intense. R-E-C, you should go see it. But what I saw in the movie is that firefighters in Spain are called bomberos. I wondered what firefighters are called in other languages. So I looked it up. In French, they're called pompiers, which is probably from pumping water. In German, I figured it would be one of those hyper-long German words, like guys who slide down poles and ride to fires and hook up hoses and pour water. But it's not. It's Feuerwehrmann, which means firefighter. Along the theme of our church services for this month of generosity, my generous gift to you today is this little bit of trivia about firefighters. But don't worry, we'll revisit firefighters a little bit later. I have to warm up this remote, I think. Well, let's see, there we are. Captain, I'm doing the best I can. This is, of course, a time for generosity. We just celebrated Thanksgiving, at which a lot of us are generous with our food and our time and meal preparation for our friends and our families. Some of us go to places to serve food to people who aren't in their families. And I know a number of people in our congregation came to church this Thursday to share generosity with each other. And of course, the Christmas season should be a time of generosity to our loved ones and to all sorts of people. I'd like to talk about generosity toward the earth and every living thing in it. It's no secret that we are under siege by the forces of evil. There's a new round of war and invasion. Immigrants and migrants are being oppressed and even killed. There's global climate change. Politicians and courts are taking away people's rights, not just to health care, but voting, free speech, access to books. There are direct threats to our very democracy. At this point, it's easy to fall into despair. The power to make change resides in governments and large corporations and powerful forces, big business, political figures, a whole political party are intent on misleading, lying, deceiving people into acting contrary to their own interests. For example, a number of years ago, some politicians convinced people that the estate tax is a bad thing. The estate tax is imposed on hugely rich people so that rich kids who have done nothing at all to earn that wealth have to share with the rest of us. But some politicians have convinced ordinary people like you and me, who will never, ever, ever be wealthy enough to pay any estate tax, that it's a death tax that punishes everyone, and regular people should oppose it, and they succeeded. The same powerful interests convince people making minimum wage into opposing higher taxes on the richest people. Even when their own taxes remain high, their incomes stagnate, and the richest people's income has zoomed upward. These same politicians and powerful interests have tried to claim for decades that climate change is not real, that there is such a thing as partial birth abortion, abortions in the delivery room, that people are forcing children to have gender reassignment surgery, that immigrants are all rapists and smugglers, that better and cheaper health care for everyone is a bad thing, that not letting the government negotiate the best deal on prescription drugs for people is a good thing, that separating children from their parents, putting kids in cages, Kidnapping people, shoving them onto buses, shipping them halfway across the country, and dumping them out on the streets is the kind of thing that Christians would do. As a result, things keep getting worse, and there's no clear path to making them better. Back in about 2007, an organization called 350.org was found. It's an environmental organization. It's about climate change, on the premise that if we could keep the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to 350 parts per million, we could avoid the worst effect of global warming. Well, as of last year, the level had risen to 421 parts per million, which is half again what it was in pre-industrial times. Governments haven't done what needs to be done. Big business, their political lackeys, and their propaganda machines have opposed any effort to save people's lives, their livelihoods, and all the plants and animals that will be squeezed out by rising temperatures and increasingly intense weather events. I'm talking right now about the environment, but we can see the crisis in other areas as well. Racism is still with us, and getting worse, and a whole political movement is justifying and promoting racism. One political party is set at setting one group of people against the other throughout the country. War is with us, always has been, and there seems to be no end in sight. There is a man who tried to overthrow the government and who urged his followers to attack the seat of government itself, and he is probably going to be nominated to run for president. And this right-wing, intolerant, anti-democracy movement is spreading to countries all over the world. Countries that have had democratic governments for decades or centuries. It will definitely continue to get worse, and we don't know how it will get better. What can we do? Do we just give up? What do we do next? Well, first, let's sing a hymn. Rise as you're able. This is Although This Life is But a Wraith, number 85 in your hymnal. And
I'm going to call an audible on this one because I can't even figure out how this. I'm a bit of a wraith, so I don't know. So we're going to do number 16 instead. Thank you, Jamie. I'm sorry. Don't hate me. One, two, three. This life is but a wraith. Sorry.
Here is a quote from the environmentalist Bill McKibben. Let's be for a while true optimists and operate on the assumption that human beings are not grossly defective. Let's assume we're capable of acting together to do remarkable things. So what is to be done? Not only about the environment, but about justice, about peace. This is a cliche, but things become a cliche because they're true. A stitch in time really does save 9. Too many cooks really do spoil the broth. The cliche is vote. Our votes really make a difference. In fact, the only difference we can make in politics is voting. And tell young people to vote. Put it this way. If you think that boomers have screwed up, stop letting them. You, young people, have the votes. Remember that at most, about 70% of people vote in any election. And for young people, it's less than 50%. If another 20 or 30% of young people actually got out and voted, you could change virtually every single election that matters. And by the way, for all of us, ignore the polls from a year before an election. These polls exist just to sell content to media and to sell clicks and views. Here's a hint. When you read about political polls at this stage, they almost never include undecided anymore. It used to be that polls would report on how many people were undecided or unclear, but now, if it's 20% for candidate A, 20% for candidate B, they don't say 60% undecided. They say it's a virtual tie, 50% of those expressing a preference each. The incumbent is always at a disadvantage a year out from an election because half of their voters are disappointed that they haven't solved all the problems in the year or two that they've had. Of course, there's no way those disappointed voters would ever vote for the opponent. They're just unhappy, and they're not willing today to commit to their party's candidate. So they'll often say, geez, I don't know. But they're not counted. Once the election gets closer, they will stop comparing their candidate to an ideal, and they will look at the prospect of the other lunatic getting in, and they will be more likely to vote for their own candidate. Don't even look at the polls. And don't put up with this false cynicism that there's no difference between parties or candidates, and that it doesn't matter if people vote. Don't let that get to you. Your vote has an effect on all the issues of reproductive rights, health care, keeping families together, promoting justice, promoting peace, and protecting the environment. In 2000, if 500 more people had voted in Florida, we would have had as president Al Gore instead of an oil billionaire. Do you think things would have been different as far as climate change? Also, you can write to legislators, you can attend rallies, you can support social justice organizations with your time and money. If you don't like to talk to weird strangers, if you really don't want to get out and march, or if your time for doing these things has passed, you can support the cause by driving people to rallies, putting up signs, giving a few bucks to an organization that's doing good. And voting is free, and it's private, and you don't have to share it with anybody. But does all this effort really make a difference? Do the forces of evil just have too much money, too much leverage, too much entrenched power? Here at church, we in the Green Sanctuary Committee have been struggling with these questions for over a year. We finally came to the conclusion that first, we have to get our heads right about where we are in terms of the environment and most specifically climate change. So first, on January 27, 2024, it's a couple of months from now, we're holding a workshop on the concept of active hope. The idea that we can get our minds and bodies in a place where we're ready to get back to work opposing the forces of evil and combating climate change, even if it has to be a little at a time. Everybody in church is welcome and you're all invited. If you do nothing from a workshop like this but get a better sense of all our roles of trying to improve the world, of better hope that we can improve our attitudes and our own lives, it'll be worth it for each of us. That's Saturday, January 27th. You'll be hearing more about it. The Sunday before then, on Sunday, January 21st, we're hosting Kent Taylor from the Climate Reality Project to give us the current state of climate change and even reasons for hope. And after the workshop, we'll have an ongoing practice to go through the ideas and ways to get active in dealing with climate change. This is not a book group, but a series of mental and physical actions to strengthen ourselves and our armor for the fight. And when we have suited up in our improved armor, we've come up with a number of specific actions that we can all do. Some are very familiar, some are newish, not just to improve the environment out there, but to improve our sense of well-being in here. We'll go into each of these in detail starting in the new year, but here's the short list. 1, political action. Attend a rally, respond to action alerts, write a letter. If you do one event a year, imagine if every person in America attended one rally a year. That would be almost 1 million people a day attending rallies about climate change. Next, adjust your home and lifestyle. While we know that changes made on an individual or family level have a limited effect on the environment and climate, it's still better to do something than nothing. And if 300 million people in America made one little change, think of the effect on CO2 emissions. In addition, moving away from a consumption at all costs point of view is liberating internally. If you have no effect on the rest of the world, knowing that you're not at their mercy is kind of valuable. Next, fix your travel. The biggest single source of carbon emissions for most middle class people is air travel. So travel closer to home, take the train, drive. And then locally, for your next car, consider an electric or a hybrid car, and do all the things you need to do to make current car travel more economical. Next, install natural habitat at home. As climate changes, there is great stress on native animals, including bees, butterflies, and other insects. And you can help them by planting native plants in your garden, or even put a container of nectar plants on the porch or the patio. Next, take a hike. Walking in nature is an opportunity to counteract the stress imposed on us by the industrialized world. Take time to walk in nature, visit a forest preserve, get close to nature, see, hear, touch, smell the natural world. Maybe not taste. You got to be careful about that. Next, read, something we're all good at. Reading about the progress that has been made in recent years in improving the environment and delaying or mitigating the worst effects of global climate change can serve as an antidote to climate grief. And there is a lot of positive news going out there. For some reason, the media doesn't report on it. Next, get your energy from renewables through a local utility or your town. Lots of opportunities to do that. Next, make climate-friendly food choices. Consumer choices on a weekly basis at the grocery store really add up. Buy in season, buy local produce, eat less meat and more plant-based meals. Grow some of your own produce, waste less food, compost food waste. Next, talk to friends and family about your climate concerns. Sharing your commitment will make your friends and family feel more hopeful, and they will in turn encourage you. And 10th, this is my personal favorite, improve habitat on a wholesale basis. Get together with people in your town to promote native plants in your neighborhood, and volunteer at habitat restoration workdays. I've been talking about habitat restoration for a long time, but let me go into detail about how it works. I work on a volunteer project with the Cook County Forest Preserves, in which we go into the woods and cut down non-native trees and shrubs. Our targets include Japanese honeysuckle and European buckthorn, which even I can tell are not native to this country. We pull invasive weeds, we collect seeds from native plants. When we finish an area that has been densely overgrown with non-native trees and shrubs, we're left with little more than bare dirt. But the next spring, the area greens up with native wildflowers and grasses. The seeds have been there waiting for a little space and a little light, and they carpet the area when they get their chance. And with all the native plants come the insects, birds, reptiles, and small animals that need those native plants to survive. Oh, and by the way, our next workday at Bemis Woods is this coming Saturday, December 2nd, starting at 9 o'clock a.m. Bemis Woods is on Ogden Avenue between Wolf Road and I-294, just about a mile from here. No experience necessary. We provide the tools and the snacks, dress for the weather, wear sturdy shoes, and bring garden or work gloves if you have them. We'll have a fire and we serve hot food. When we cut down trees and shrubs, we pile them up and we set them on fire, and that's how we get the fire to cook lunch. We also use prescribed fire, which you've probably heard about, to stop non-native plants from coming back. Our native plants have evolved over thousands of years to be fire resistant because wildfires started by lightning or by Native Americans were common in our area since forever. Plants from foreign lands which did not evolve in a regime of fire are killed by prescribed fires and don't come back. Here's how prescribed fire works. To control a fire, we make a fire break where there's no fuel to carry the fire beyond a certain point. So we make a line around the space we want to burn. You can dig down to bare dirt, or as some people call it, mineral soil, to remove fuel, or to use fire itself, a backfire, to burn a line where the grass and other plants are burned out and there's no fuel. The fire hits that dead space and stops. That's how you control a fire. Of course, you have to be right there to put out the backfire, which is typically easy to control because you're right on top of it. Here's a story. In the Chicago fire of 1873, as the fire moved north, west, and south from downtown, an alderman on the south edge of downtown got a bunch of barrels of gunpowder, and he told the building owners that he would have to blow up all the buildings in the one block. And the owner said, "You're crazy." But the alderman explained that, look, these buildings are going to burn down anyway. But if we blow them up now, there will be no fire to carry the fuel, with no fuel to carry the fire further south, and the fire will stop right there. He was building a fire break. They blew up the buildings, and it worked. The fire stopped right there. And that's why firefighters in Spain are called bomberos. Back in the day, before high-rise ladder trucks and fire hydrants with hoses, the only effective way to put out big urban fires was to blow up buildings. Bomberos were guys who blew up buildings to stop fires. The name stuck, and modern firefighters in Spain are still called bomberos. And all this talk about generosity toward the earth, I'm saying we all need to be bomberos. Not literally blow things up. I am not advocating violence, but to make a fire break, to make a line, and tell the forces of evil, this far and no farther. When people march for racial justice in the wake of the George Floyd killing, I'll get there. Oh, it would work so much better if the stuff worked. They were bomberos. When people go out into the woods and improve natural habitat, they are bomberos. And I understand there's a good opportunity to do this kind of work this very next Saturday at Bemis Woods, 9 o'clock a.m. When people march for climate justice, they are bomberos. And in 2017, after a monster was elected president, millions of people joined the women's marches all over the country. They were bomberos and pink sombreros. Let's get our heads right. Let's put our suits of armor on. Let's be bomberos. And let's sing a hymn. Rise and body your spirit, please.
I have more for you from the teachings of the Buddha, adapted from the Kadhakapatha. So here's a reading from there. A man buries a treasure in a deep pit, thinking, it will be useful in time of need, or if the king is displeased with me, or if I am robbed or fall into debt, or if food is scarce, or bad luck befalls me. But all treasure may not profit the owner at all, for he may forget where he has hidden it, or goblins may steal it, or his enemies, or even his kinsmen may take it when he is careless. But by charity, goodness, restraint, and self-control, man and woman alike can store up a well-hidden treasure, a treasure which cannot be given to others and which robbers cannot steal. A wise person should do good. That is the treasure which will not leave one.
Please join in these words as we extinguish the chalice. This symbolic fire is out, but the fire has spread. We are on fire. We carry its heat and light into the world.